Hello there, everyone, and welcome to this edition of the podcast. So, I've actually been away on holiday, so back now. I actually went to the same country as Ralph did. He went, but he went on the other side of it. So he went to Vancouver and Whistler. I went to Toronto and Montreal. Had an absolutely brilliant time, and I'm not showing off. I'm just saying it's the only holiday I've had this year. It's the only one I'm going to have this year. So yeah, there we go. Thank you very much indeed for the sympathy. I'm now back until Christmas, New Year. So anyway, let's go today with two things. So first of all, we've got to talk about an update on trade tariffs, and what the latest is in America, because there have been some very important developments. And then the other thing is we have. We just thought we'd dive into something quite interesting. One of my favourite articles of the week, which I think was from today's Watson's Daily, and that was all about calling your boss a name and not and getting fired, but in fact the tribunal finding in your favour. So anyway, we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But anyway, how are you doing, Ralph?
I'm good. I'm just looking forward to the second segment
Excellent,
of today.
fantastic.
But
Fantastic.
we need to get the first one out.
We do need to talk about the first one. Yeah.
Am I talking about this already,
Yeah,
or do
go
you
on then.
want to actually share your
Well, I can say,
pearls of wisdom?
Yeah,
with us?
well, I mean, all it is that obviously Trump, he did his Liberation Day tariffs, and he did this via executive order, which means that he bypassed the usual channels, and Congress in particular, and a court found that in fact he overstepped the mark. That means that those tariffs are in effect effectively illegal. He has appealed to the Supreme Court. They are going to give some kind of judgment within this year, apparently, and yeah, so that's where we are at the moment. I think that means that trade, in terms of implications, just makes everything even more uncertain. I think that the ultimate thing is that doing business with America is getting progressively less attractive, and I think that although businesses aren't going to say it overtly because they don't want Trump to get angry with them, I do think that actually this is going to mean that increasingly business, where possible, is going to try to cut America out, either as a customer or as in any supply chains, because of course, if Trump just decides to do his thing and and just sort of impose things suddenly without any warning, then I think that obviously that it means that things are going to get more uncertain for business. Businesses hate uncertainty, and so yeah, I think there'll be a transition period whereby a lot of companies will do as much as they can to try and cut America out. But yeah, I think that at the moment it's going to be very difficult. But we shall see what happens. I know that Trump has been trying to load the bases into. I mean, he's in the law. In terms of all the big law firms supposed to be giving him millions and millions of dollars worth of free advice because he threatened them. He's loading the bases in the Fed. He's loading the bases, as I say, loading the bases with Trump, pro-Trump people, and he's trying to get people into the Supreme Court as well. And presumably one of the reasons is because of what's going on now. So anyway, so that's kind of where we are. It is an important development, but we're not right. We're not there at the end because obviously Trump is appealing. But what do you think, Ralph?
Yes, I mean, we discussed this before, of course. This is basically a sequel of a sequel on our show, because Trump is keeping them coming. And so this is basically something which I would need to introduce with this sort of segment that you're all aware of when you watch any kind of series on television, which is Last Time on Peter Watson's. And last time it was actually that we talked about IEPA. Because before I get to IEPA, just a quick reminder, as if it was required, but everybody of course knows that Trump is governing by executive order. He is only able to do so because he is invoking emergency statuses of various descriptions, which he is able to do on the basis of various laws that exist in America. One of these laws is IEPA. This is a very funny acronym, spelled IEEPA, International Economic Emergencies Policy Act. Everybody clap.
I thought you were going to forget it then.
Yeah, that's what you did think.
I could see that look across your face.
That's what everybody else thought, but I didn't. And round of applause, please, for me
well
to
done.
remember such a bristly acronym. Thank you very much. I'm here all week. So, continuing with IEPA, which is the International Emergency. Oh no, I can't believe it.
I was gonna
be. Oh, this is terrible.
Yeah.
The International Economics Emergency Policy Act.
Nice.
This has got a clause in it which allows the president to issue executive orders bypassing Congress effectively if an emergency exists. And these emergencies of an economic nature, we don't have to go into this again because we've delved into this in some detail several months ago when this became first interesting and topical. But basically what Trump is doing and has been doing in other areas of policy administration as well is to basically invent a crisis or trump up a crisis. No, I swear this was not
no pun intended.
No, it actually really wasn't this time.
Okay. Right.
To invent a crisis, manufacture one, and then enhance it to the level that allows him to do several things unilaterally by bypassing Congress. That's the playbook.
Yeah.
And he's done this in several ways, not just IEPA, but other acts as well. And IEPA was the basis on which the bulk of the tariffs that have been announced since Liberation Day were implemented. In fact, all of the tariffs announced on Liberation Day and additional sectoral tariffs in aluminium and some other areas were announced later on the basis of a different act. Then what happened is that I'm not going to go too much into detail. And another court just basically said that the Liberation Day tariffs were unlawful. Trump appealed, and they were granted a stay. It's actually called stay. It's not called stay of execution, but it's impossible not to think of stay of execution in this context. So it's a legal stay, which just basically means that any decision is coming, but while it is coming, any action is held in abeyance. In other words, the Liberation Day tariffs were allowed to continue as implemented, conditional on a modification in light of the judgment when it was to come. And this has now happened. The federal court in the federal circuit has ruled that it was indeed unlawful to implement the tariffs on the basis of IEPA for the reasons which we implied, because it was not lawful to call the specific condition on which they were implemented a national crisis. And this is now what the court has ruled, and so you would think that that basically the game is up. Actually, you wouldn't think that because you know how this works out in the real world, because now the next thing is, of course, we're going to appeal. And the Trump administration is, of course, appealing, and the next level, indeed the last remaining level, is now the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is going to rule, and you said by the end of the year. I don't know. This is probably true. I don't know what the time scale is, but it's probably going to be this year. And then we will see. And so this is what I find interesting in this context, because when you look at the Trump administration so far, then we have seen a very clear and noticeable rollback of the rule of law in America, a rollback of the governing framework of democracy, and also a rollback of the normal way in which the executive enforces acts, by which I mean the police. I mean, I'm talking about the fact that he's put National Guards into various cities in America. This was also done on the basis of an interpretation of certain acts as a crisis. In California, specifically, the Trump administration called certain demonstrations held there a rebellion, and that was also now recently ruled out as illegal, as unlawful, because it wasn't a rebellion. And so we see, parallel to what is happening in the field of, let's call it in the widest sense, economics, we see something in adjacent fields of the American society which are played out on similar lines. Now, I'm only mentioning this to actually create the soundstage here, because this is not something which is done in isolation. It is a playbook which is emerging as something by which the Trump administration, I believe, wishes to roll back the democratic institutions in America and subvert America into an autocracy.
Yeah.
Part of that, currently, coming now back to what we are discussing, is now the ball is now in the court of the Supreme Court. And it is interesting to see whether, in fact, the judiciary is still going to emerge as a robust bulwark against this tide, because we now will see whether the Supreme Court is pliant to the Trump administration or not. And this is not something which is going to be a watertight test case, of course. The Supreme Court may say it is in fact illegal. That doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to be pliant in other ways. But it is still going to be very interesting to see this ruling. So a lot of commentators in America and outside of the country will follow the Supreme Court ruling, not just to see whether the Liberation Day tariffs are held up, but also to see whether this indirect element, whether the Supreme Court is or can be expected to uphold a barrier against the Trump administration's attempt to roll back democratic governing. And so this particular ruling will be very interesting to watch. And by extension, it is important to think about the following, because we are, of course, a business podcast. You might have forgotten by now, but there is so much politics which is now involved in this, and business and the economy is clearly driven by the Trump administration's policy decisions, and therefore you have to comment on it. But now, forging the link to something which we more justifiably should comment on is the stock markets. Now, the stock markets also, you might say, are not the real economy. There's a secondary effect that might well be, but it is still interesting to see that the implementation of the Liberation Day tariffs led to a very marked and clear correction downwards in the equity markets. A correction, however, which has now been reversed and has recovered, and now the S&P 500 is something up like net 6% over where it was. So clearly, the markets are not pricing in a sustained presence of these tariffs. I mean, the markets are not thinking that these tariffs are going to be there sustainably, or at least that is the implicit assumption. And I believe, this is my personal theory, I believe the markets are shrugging it off precisely because there is so much uncertainty over whether they are going to be so implemented or not, whether they're going to be, whether tariffs are going to have staying power or not. And part of it is not just whether a court will uphold the legality of them. Another part is just the chaos which has defined the implementation of them. I mean, the tariffs are on, and then they're off, and then they're only for Canada, then they're only for the EU, then they're 50%, then they're 30%, etc., etc. Nobody knows what is going on, and the markets on the one hand, they hate uncertainty, but it has to be an uncertainty which is at least which is discoverable as uncertainty. This one is so much of a shambles that the markets have basically decided to shrug this off. However, they will only be able to shrug this off for as long as we have no clear decision on this. And so now what I'm actually thinking is that we are back in this sort of game. The can has been kicked down the road another 100 yards here. We still don't know whether the Liberation Day tariffs are going to stay or not. Next up is now the Supreme Court and its ruling. But my prediction is, and this is going to be interesting to see whether I'm right or not, so we're going to have to revisit this episode in several months' time. My prediction is that the Supreme Court is going to dodge the bullet here. Because I've done this before in a political hot potato. If you remember, when they were asked to rule whether a convicted or whether an identified, I forgot the word, an insurrectionist could be on the ballot or not. And they were basically saying, well, I mean, first of all, it's not clear whether Trump is an insurrectionist or not. And second, this has got nothing to do with us. I mean, we're not ruling on this, we're ruling on something else. And so they avoided a hot potato there. And I believe they're going to avoid this hot potato as well. And the way in which they're going to do this is they're going to assert what we all know, that it is not, in fact, the responsibility of the Trump administration to do this, it's the responsibility of Congress to do it. And if I'm right in this, then this is going to be entirely farcical, because the entire reason that the legal wrangle exists is because Trump deliberately and programmatically tries to avoid going through Congress by invoking these emergency acts on part of IEPA. Now it's been kicked to the Supreme Court. If I'm right, they're going to kick it back down to Congress. Congress will then have to basically say, well, now it's in our court again, so we have to say something. But the House and the Senate is finely tipped, finely balanced. So my guess would be that before the midterms, we're not going to see anything developing here. Which means, therefore, that from the point of view of the stock markets, they can travel before they arrive. This is one of these jargon words which you hear in the markets a lot. It is better to travel than to arrive. It's taken me ages to understand what that means. It's just basically saying, I have a prediction here, but I'm just going to say, it's going to come true in the future. So I'll let you talk in just a second. So just to come to an end for this, I believe the markets are going to travel before they arrive, and they are not going to be affected by this until and unless it is clear that the Liberation Day tariffs are there to stay, in which case I'm then going to expect a market correction.
Amazing. So, I mean, I've always had an alternative thing, which I think we talked about a few years ago. Buy the mystery, sell the history. So that's one of the. Anyway, right. So, actually, just an interesting sort of adjunct to that is
I think it was sell the history, buy the future, isn't it?
No, nothing to do with future.
Wasn't it?
It's to do with mystery and history because they rhyme.
Oh, mystery, that's what it was.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
buy
the mystery, sell. Yeah. So anyway, I think that as a result of this, or one of the results of this, is that gold price has gone ridiculously high. It's gone through $3,500. Goldman Sachs has said, it could go to $5,000. You and I know that actually Goldman Sachs is well known for doing stuff like this. I mean, they do this with the oil price. They'll say the oil price is going to go to $200 or something, and it gets lots of views because it's Goldman Sachs and because they say something really shocking. and then the whole idea is they kind of rein it in. But anyway, it was very interesting. Now, so sorry, we've not really got much time. I have to go, but let's just quickly talk about the. So there was I think it was a Guardian story. It was talking about how a lady went to a tribunal for unfair dismissal, and basically won. It turns out she had called her boss a dickhead.
That's correct.
And I'm just quoting that because I don't normally say words
like that. We wouldn't say that, no.
No, absolutely not. So that's what happened, and it was all a bit of a shocker. Yeah, so
the shocker was that you're allowed to say that.
But anyway,
in that particular case, because what the court or the tribunal said basically, well, you only said it once, and it was taken out of context, or it has to be seen in context. It was sort of more like a banter sort of comment, and so it's okay. What I would say, two things. I know you have to go, but two things. First of all, if you're working on trading floors in the City of London or on Wall Street, then your view on what is appropriate language is skewed. So let us not make whatever goes on trading floors the benchmark of what is acceptable, polite conversation outside of it. And the second one, I would say, even though the court has ruled this, I mean, don't call your boss a dickhead.
No, don't do it. Don't do it. It can limit your career as a CLM, a career limiting move. So anyway, on that note, I'm going to have to go because I have to go. But thank you so much. It's lovely to see you again, Ralph, as always. Thank you, everyone, for listening or watching even. And have a great day, weekend, whatever it is. But anyway, thanks very much.
Thank you, guys, for having me. Bye.